Hello and welcome to Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. Our guest today is a Pulitzer Award-winning journalist, an acclaimed author, an awesome speaker, and a renowned editor. I'm very happy to welcome to Cafe DC today our friend and VOA's director, Amanda Bennett. Amanda, thank you very much.
Faiz, I'm really happy to be here.
Join this show.
Thank
It's
you.
such a pleasure. And yes, having said all this, a journalist, an author, a speaker, now you're heading an international news organization. Again, having read your background, having listened to some of your speeches and talks, I'm really baffled where to start. You have such a versatile background. But one thing struck me most and stood out really was your speech on TED about hope versus denial, or denial versus hope. And the speech basically was about your book, The Cost of Hope. So before we get into journalism and other aspects of your professional life, let's talk about this work, because this is something which really touches so many hearts, and it goes across the board, across countries, continents, and everybody is basically concerned about death and life situation, ailments. And some of your books, actually you wrote 6 books, and almost all of them had to do something with ailments, life, death, and other situations, the life situation. So let's talk about the cost of hope.
Thank you. Well, the book is about my late husband and his struggle with cancer. He and I fought the cancer for 7 years together, and I really, even more than him, I think, I really thought that if I worked hard enough, I could keep him alive forever. I know that sounds silly, but it was just the way I was feeling, that I was going to push and push and push. I was going to find every drug, I was going to find every treatment, I was going to do everything I could. And so the book is about that process and why it is people do that, even when sometimes it seems irrational, even when sometimes doctors call it denial. And I came to the conclusion that that kind of struggle, that kind of push, is really a very basic human thing, which is you want to have hope. You want to have hope that you can do something. You want to have hope that you can keep your loved ones alive. And so I talked about how we deal with that struggle between pushing too much and having hope.
So you said hope is not a bug.
Yeah.
It's a feature.
Hope is not a bug, it's a feature.
Please.
So doctors and the medical system, I think, are always sort of a little bit, kind of scornful about the way people like me reacted. They think, well, we can see clearly this person is dying. Why are they in denial? Why are they denying what's going on? And that makes it seem like there's something wrong with the person who feels that way. That's the bug part. And my conclusion was that it's the medical profession that needs to change, because this is the way human beings behave, this is the way human beings feel, and that everybody needs to try and come to grips with the fact that human beings are filled with hope, even at the end. And so if you want to help people come to this process, which everyone is going to come to, you have to work with the feature that comes with the human being.
And then again, doctors, the scientist community, as well as people, families, they also talk about mercy killing. How do you see that? I mean, that's also part of this modern, not even actually modern, it's been there for quite some time. People just having to come to a conclusion that this is about time. Maybe just someone wants to kill himself or herself because of some terminal illness. So that's also been part of the system. How do you address that?
Well, that's not something I have a strong feeling about, although I lived in a state that was one of the first states in the United States to legalize that. I think, though, I can understand the feeling, because people want to feel like they're in control. They want to feel like they're in control of their destiny. So the hope that I had was a hope that I could control my husband's destiny, that I could control it and help him live longer. And I think for some people it's the opposite. Their feeling of control is they don't want to suffer anymore. They want to have control. But I think it's always the same thing. It's a feeling that you want to have hope that you can live your life the way you want to.
One good question about this, I'm sure people will have it on their minds. When you say the medical community, the doctors, they have to accommodate and they have to change the system to accommodate this emotion, hope, and which you call a feature. So what kind of changes you perceive and you recommend that the system has to make in order to accommodate this emotion, this basic human emotion?
Well, so here in this country, the kind of hope and the kind of push I had means that we're doing very expensive things and things that aren't always very rational. We're spending a lot of money on treatments that may extend life by a month or two. And so the hope that we have isn't always, at the end, very useful. But I think what the medical profession needs to do is help understand that people need to begin thinking earlier about this process and not feel like that when they come to the end they're giving up, because that's the way I felt, that there was either one choice, either I was going to fight or I was going to give up, when I think there's a middle ground, which is that you need to think and you need to discuss and you need to become aware of what your hopes and dreams are and work with those instead of against them.
Very good. So that was one aspect of your life. As an author and to an extent as an activist. Let's talk about journalism. You have served at the Wall Street Journal for actually 23 years. You've been in China and you have done some other very major impressive work at major publications here in this country. After all these years, how do you see this transformation of journalism, this change, this metamorphosis, so to speak, that you see? All of a sudden, everything, having come from this very organized organizations, organized journalism, now you see this, everything goes on the social media, even TV, live discussions. So a lot of people, actually, those who have done so much work in the previous years, feel lost. Even 30 years old, they feel lost in this environment. How do you see that challenge?
So I think I began my journalistic career, as you say, when newspapers and television were basically the only ways of communicating news, and we were in charge. And a change like the one we've gone through over the past 15 years, when all different ways of reporting news, of writing news, of experiencing news, of distributing news, everything has changed. It's all broken apart, and there's a million different ways to do it. Obviously, that's been an incredibly painful change for people, because it's changed the way they do their jobs, it's changed the way they relate to other people, it's changed the size of newsrooms, because these big, safe newsrooms have gone away. So I can understand why that would be very painful. I think we're coming a little bit to the other side of that change, where we're starting to see how we can use that change, how the fact that there's many, many, many different ways of distributing news and information gives people enormous amount of access. There's a downside to that, because irresponsible people can have access to it, and that, the freedom of anybody to express what they want to means that they get to do that too. But I think in the end, readers, viewers, listeners are not stupid people. They can understand quality journalism and quality information. They can understand people who are rational and make sense and are trying to struggle for the right answers. They can understand responsible journalism. So I think I can see the wonderful aspect of this change that's happened. There's many, many different ways that your show can be seen around the world. There's ways in which the people at Voice of America can be seen outside their own countries in ways that they never could before. That's very exciting.
So Amanda, looking at your own background and your previous years, what was the biggest challenge which you had to face in transforming yourself from a different background to the one that you have right now?
Gosh, there were lots of challenges along the way, but mostly I think I was helped by the fact that I think journalism is a wonderful profession. So all the changes always seemed worth it to me. It seemed worth it because the basic idea of informing the public, informing people about things they needed to know, to me is giving them a kind of freedom. And I always felt that that was worth it. So even when there were things that were hard, trying to learn to do different things or different jobs, I always felt it was worth it, and that made it really fun.
Very good. At this point, we have to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk to you about your current assignment. So please get ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
I think it's definitely a possibility because telling America's story means telling America's story, both good and bad.
Welcome back. I'm Faiz Rahman. You're watching Cafe DC, and our guest today is Ms. Amanda Bennett, the director of Voice of America. Well, so when we left for the break, we said, we're going to come back and talk about your current assignment. Now you're, after having done all this, having written 6 books, your work at the Wall Street Journal, Knight Ridder group of newspapers, and then you are heading a very important news organization, an international news organization, Voice of America. How do you see this transition from the private sector to the public?
So I worried about that since I had never worked in the public sector, but when I got here I realized it's way more similar than it is different. We're all journalists here. We all have the same values here. We all work the same way. And to me, the challenges are very similar. I think it's an amazing organization. I think there's very few organizations like it in the world. And so I think what we are trying to accomplish here is really quite remarkable.
So what's the difference between a regular news organization here in America and, Voice of America? What is it that we do differently than a regular American news channel?
Well, the biggest difference, of course, is that we put all these news services together in one large organization. There's no other news service in America that has this kind of operation.
45 different languages.
45 different languages, 45 different newsrooms. There's many publications and news organizations that have broad international operations, but not ones that report and read and produce and distribute the news in 45 different languages, all coming out of the same building. That is really remarkable. That's the biggest difference.
Very good. We get a lot of delegations from overseas, in our case from Pakistan, India, and other South Asian countries. And one of the most repeated comments or questions is, are you a mouthpiece of America?
Well, our mission is to tell America's story. But that's no different a mission than public sector news organizations, and I don't find that we're doing our job any differently. Telling America's story means covering America like a beat, the way other people cover America. We do the same thing. We cover America's business. We cover America's technology. We cover America's education systems. We talk about the people who come here from other countries and make lives here. Writing about America is not being a mouthpiece for the government. We write about the good and the bad, and we broadcast the good and the bad.
So you have a very strong background in investigative journalism. VOA has done some work in that field, but it's not its strong forte, so to speak. But since your arrival here, I have seen a lot of chatter here and there that yes, that's the direction probably some of our newsrooms going to take. How do you see this? Is it really something of a possibility that VOA can do a strong American investigative journalism, and would that be okay with the funders of this organization? I mean, the Congress.
I think it's definitely a possibility because telling America's story means telling America's story, both good and bad. And just as American private sector news organizations do investigative journalism, so too do we. If we're going to cover the full range of the American story, investigative journalism is one piece of it. And also, since coming here, I've discovered that in these 45 different news organizations that make up Voice of America, there are some very strong investigative journalists in those language services themselves who are trying to do investigative stories on their own. So supporting them as well is part of our mission, because part of our mission is to be a full, fair, and objective news organization that helps the rest of the world.
And for example, one of the comments that we received actually among our colleagues here, would you approve a story if it were about, let's say, the White House, that we were going deeper into something that we feel that we can unearth that in the White House, the State Department, or any other federal agency? Would that be something okay with the overall mission of the organization?
I would ask exactly the same questions of this story that I would ask of a story in my previous life, which is this story important? Is it real? Does it matter to the American people? Can we report it fairly? Can we report it fully? And those would be the first questions I would ask of a story like that. And those are the same questions that I would have asked of a story in that situation in any other news organization I was a part of.
Before we started this interview, actually we promoted it on the Facebook and other social media, and we invited some questions. We thought it would be nice for us to get some input from our target audience, what they want to know, and ask from the director of VOA. And again, to sum them up, there were lots of questions, but to sum them up, what is the exact mission of VOA in a country like Pakistan? Why do they have to watch VOA when they have like 100 different TV channels and several hundreds FM channels to listen to? So what is it that we are offering, which is, of course, you may turn the table and ask this question that as a service chief, or what can I offer? But on a bigger picture, what do you think is the difference, that something that we can pull that crowd in? Is their question, not mine, actually. So.
Yeah, and I think it's a very fair question. The first thing is, of course, they don't have to watch VOA. Nobody has to watch anything. That's one of the challenges of the new, very rich and open media landscape. But one of the things I've been very surprised at, actually, in walking around, I've now visited all our regions and I've begun visiting our language services. One of the things I've become aware of is that people are very, very interested in certain aspects of American life. They're very interested in our entrepreneurial spirit and to learn how that compares with their own. They're interested in how we raise our children, to compare it with their own, just as we would be interested in how in Pakistan you raise your children. They're interested in education. What's the American educational system like? They're interested in what happens to Pakistani Americans when they come here and make a life here. How does their life compare to the life of people back home? All these things are of interest to people. So the way you get people to watch or listen to or engage with your news, information, and public affairs broadcast and writing is to be interesting and relevant to them. That's the same challenge public sector media has. We've got exactly the same. Our mission is to write about America, to broadcast about America. We have to do it in a way that really means something to our audiences.
It's a unique organization. I mean, as you said before, 45 different languages. It's almost like United Nations of journalism in Washington, D.C. And people come from overseas. They bring their culture, their languages, their style of work, their work ethics. So, I mean, is it really that humongous of a job? I mean, before you took this job, did you realize that, you'll be managing an organization with so many different cultures, attitudes, behaviors, languages, and just a different outlook on different things that we do here?
Yeah, I was actually more concerned before I got here than I am now. I was very concerned that managing something so vast was going to be almost an impossible task. The thing I discovered when I got here is that even though all those things are different, the languages, the cultures, there's so much more that's similar. We are all journalists, and we all are passionate of our mission. And having that binds us together means that you can manage in the same way you would manage any other organization. There may be differences on the surface, and there may be arguments, there may be things we have to settle, maybe conflicts we have to resolve, but that's true in any news organization. The common passion for our mission really makes this a very stable ship.
Finally, time went by so fast.
Yeah.
So I've been given some instructions by the producers that we have to wrap it up. Okay, so you're an experienced journalist. You've been in the field. You have been to different countries. You have served in China. So for young journalists, those who are already in the field and those who are aspiring to be journalists, your advice?
Oh, I am so impressed with young journalists these days. I see them coming to journalism with a flexibility and a set of skills that I could only have dreamed of. They know how to tell a story with their eyes. They know how to tell a story with numbers. They know how to tell a story with sound and pictures as well as words. But I would say that understanding the basic journalistic values is really, really critical because, as I said, the internet makes every kind of form of expression possible. You need to have a compass. You need to have a gyroscope. You need to have something that centers you. And having the values of truth and integrity and freedom of expression really are things that center you. And even though you know how to take pictures with an iPhone, you know how to do social media, you should also pay attention to watching your own personal values.
Just one quick question for my audience, actually, and young journalists. What's the difference between news writing and storytelling while writing a news? Briefly, please. Yeah.
So,
in your opinion,
news writing is saying what happened. Storytelling is saying why it happened and what the outcome was. So a man walks into a room is what happened. A man walks into a room and sees a present on the table and wonders whether he should open it. That's the beginning of a story because you don't know what's in there. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who put it there. That's a story. So a story is the why and the how and the what's going to happen next. That's the difference.
Amanda, you have written 6 books. I have a minute, actually. So if you were to recommend 2 of them to our audience, what would that be?
Well, I'm personally...
The Cost of Hope, definitely.
I'm personally very fond of The Cost of Hope because it's a subject very dear to my heart. And then many, many years ago, I wrote a biography of a man who left the United States.
The man who stayed behind.
The man who stayed behind. He left the United States and went and lived in China, and he lived in Mao Zedong's China. He became Mao's interpreter, and he lived with the communist revolutionaries. And I told the story of his life, and that is a very interesting
And he
story.
spent 16 years in prison in China?
16 years in solitary confinement when people arrested him thinking he was a spy, which he was not. He is now in his mid-90s. He lives in the Seattle area, and he's still one of my very best friends.
Wow, maybe another person for me to interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure and honor.
Thank you
to talk
so
to you
much. I'm
on
so
such
happy
a
to be here.
diverse, so
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of Cafe DC with Amanda Bennett. See you next week with another interesting interview. Goodbye.